perfect practice makes perfect. So making sure you're actually in the game, you're in the conversation, you're in that moment. Over the last couple decades of leading sales teams, I've definitely learned a lot about the talent that you have and really making sure that you've got the right capabilities.
I love seeing where some of those AI solutions are going to be able to have those role plays.
Really understanding the psychometrics of what drives humans to perform is so critically important.
I'm Dr. Amy Athey. As a licensed psychologist and performance expert, working with elite athletes, C-suite executives, and high performers operating in some of the most demanding environments, I've seen what it truly takes to perform when it matters most. From supporting members of the Naval Special Warfare community to advising leaders in high-stakes, high-pressure situations, one truth remains consistent. The tools that drive performance are the same. You prepare in a way that allows you to show up ready when the moment arrives. Each week, I'll share practical tools and insights to help you strengthen how you think, lead, and perform. Welcome to Still Evolving.
Stephanie, welcome to Still Evolving. Very grateful for this opportunity and looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks so much for inviting me, Dr. Amy. I am as well.
We wanted to jump in today and talk a bit more about your experience, your journey as a sales growth leader. And oftentimes when we talk about high performance for sales leaders, we hear about talent selection. So first you have to have your team. You have to have your high performers. I'm curious if you could reflect on your journey and some of those lessons learned and where you have seen maybe there's tools out there that's enabled you to build the team that is able to deliver.
Yeah, thanks so much for that question. And it's interesting, over the last couple decades of leading sales teams, I've definitely learned a lot about the talent that you have and really making sure that you've got the right capabilities as well as capacity. Earlier in my career when I was building teams, it definitely was about capacity. How could you get more feet on the street is something that we often say in sales leadership, because the more people you have, the more people you're going to reach, theoretically. But what's been learned over the last, decade or so is really it's not only about capacity, but it's capability. And so you want to make sure that you've got those two very tightly connected, and that not only are you hiring the right people to do the right things in the right roles, but that they have the capabilities to do that. Oftentimes we're in a hurry to hire, and we hire quickly and fire slowly. And it should really be the other way. I don't like the word fire, but really the other way, which is hire slow and fire fast. As a general rule, most of us in hiring positions want to bring somebody in around the mid-level mark. So they've got room to grow, but we know that they have that capability. And oftentimes when we're in a hurry, we will either hire people we know from other organizations that have been performing well there, and really using more of a gut instinct to do that versus scientifically looking at what is it that actually predicts success in humans in these roles, and really taking the time to focus on that to make sure that we've got people in their roles and they can develop their careers and hit their goals successfully. So that's the really key thing. It's not only about that capacity, it's capability.
And I really appreciate the more scientific approach to that you're describing, understanding that a high performer in one organization or one team or one industry may or may not then transfer to the organization that you're leading. So can you talk a bit about how that gut feel approach sometimes fails sales leaders when they're building their teams? And then how do you go about scientifically selecting and understanding those capabilities that are truly the best fit to optimize the team and the organization you're working within?
Great question. It's interesting. I think that when I look at that gut instinct, we tend to be, sales is art and science mixed together. And so is the selection process of who we bring into our organizations and build teams with. It can also be very emotional when you're looking at people hitting goals and achievement and what those things are that are inside of us that drive us to really have that determination to achieve. And as leaders, we often look for people like us with those same traits and behaviors that we're observing that aren't really, we can't prove, but we're observing them. Oftentimes we'll look at competitors and say, oh, that person's performing really, really well in that organization, and I know them, I can trust them, that when they come to my organization, that they will also perform as well. because I've seen them do it. They know we have trust between us. Therefore, I know that they will be committed and engaged. And that's true to a certain point. We also see that gut instinct kind of fail us when we automatically promote people from being individual contributors in sales that are high performing in sales and put them into a sales leadership role, and then scratch our heads when they're just not performing the same they were as individuals. So that gut instinct gets you so far, and it's an important part of the equation. However, when it comes to the actual performance and we're seeing them fail and we're going like, why is this not working? Why were they performing so well somewhere else or in a different role, and they're not in this role? And that's where really understanding the psychometrics of what drives humans to perform is so critically important. And that happens not only, as you know, in sports and athletics, but also and in the military, but also in the sales world and in the commercial world. So we see a lot of those same traits and behaviors that are really important to get people to achieve. What happens, though, is every organization is different. And I'm talking mostly about like mid-market, large enterprise organizations here. And when we're hiring at scale, we're saying, okay, how do I predict this person's going to be a high performer? And gut instinct's part of it, but the science is really important. And we use assessment tools to do that. And I've been using assessment tools for probably, the last 5 to 7 years to really say, let's predict what performance looks like in our organization, in our industry, in our subsector, and get very, very specific on what the traits that we're hardwired with are required to be successful. So we all know as sales leaders, those hard skills are important. Like, how do we prospect? How do we identify opportunities? How do we do discovery in a very methodical way? But what's really important underneath that is the psychometrics that hardwire us to achieve and to have that drive and to have the curiosity, those traits that are really important that actually make us successful no matter where we go.
It's a great point when we take a look at really what you're describing is how holistically can we have our data set to make this decision of fit and who would most likely be able to step into that role and perform. And you mentioned how in these other verticals, sport, military, that we've been using assessment for a good long while, right? With talent selection and development. My experience with that is it's an ongoing process. So let's just say a coach or a GM, they may be using that data collection method, whatever assessment tool, interview, even scanning. I mean, depending on the, role, scanning social media, see what's out there, right? Like they're collecting all this data and they're taking that information and then looking at what has been benchmarked for those high performers within that organization. As you mentioned, it doesn't always fit certain coaches' philosophy, the coach's way of running an offense, for example. They may be looking for very specific skills so that high performer can really thrive. But over time, it may evolve and it may change. So understanding what does that data set of those who are currently high performers, and then how are you continuing to iterate that as perhaps the organization grows? Maybe there's an M&A. Maybe there's a different, a different sector that maybe you're pivoting into that, like you said, just because the sales leader executed one may or may not then transfer to another. So I appreciate the more holistic approach. Like, how can we expand past just, hey, I know my guy and that works for me. Beyond that, like relational trust, what else can we take in to make that best decision? So, and then evolve it over time. Absolutely. Yeah,
I think two great points there. One I really like is this evolution, and we've seen a ton of evolution, obviously in our markets, whether it's, I think more evolution in the last 25 years than we saw the 100 years previous, right. And they're all happening at the same time. So previously you'd say, okay, we've got this one big change, like industrial revolution, kind of a big change, right? Yeah. The technology revolution that really started with digitalization and the web being more of a commercial tool, right? The web's been around for a long time, but as a commercial tool, and the change that made. Now you're looking in the 21st century, the amount of geopolitical conflict, the amount of challenges we have with administration around tariffs and things we have with macroeconomic climates. And then you throw in AI on top of all of that. Can't have a podcast without talking about AI, right? So, all these things are evolving, but they're evolving really, really quickly. And so when you look at something that would be very tried and true, like a sales methodology, and pick any of them, right? It could be Medic, it could be Spin, it could be Miller Hyman, it could be Salient, whatever. Challenger, it could be all these methodologies. Those haven't changed, but the way that people are using them has changed. And so now, especially when you're thinking about how companies are ingesting AI and trying to find this return on investment, return on their dollars spent, people are using these tools differently. So we have to think about how that's evolving as well, and not using the tools always in the same way, even though they haven't changed. The underlying foundational parts haven't changed. It's the application that we need to think about. And you've raised a really important point. There's these injection points of change, like merger and an acquisition, right? Launching a new product, go-to-market strategy changes, a new C-level person coming into an organization, taking the company in a different direction. All these things signal change, where we do need to recalibrate our talent and say, hey, maybe when we were a transactional organization, this profile was the one we wanted to hire for. We wanted to move that middle section up to the top and recalibrate the lower performers. But when that changes to maybe a more relationship style, then your top performers might change. And it's really important to recognize that as those changes happen, we need to recalibrate what good looks like and define what that looks like in our organization, and not be using profiles from 20 years ago, or even 10 now, 5.
Absolutely. And also understanding that that's not just for your selection process, right? Then you have to take a look at, like you mentioned, given that change, how are you supporting your team in their development and in their growth? If different skills, or they need to make subtle shifts to be able to optimize in the new climate, new mission, if you will. I wanted to turn to that. I'm curious. As you know, my background comes from high performers who invest heavily in reps, right? In the deliberate rehearsal of their craft, whether that's in sport, whether that was military operators. I'm curious, I'm thinking in this very fast-paced, high, very, a lot of change going on, as you just mentioned, in those environments. Where, or is there carve out time for those reps, for sales leaders, for sales team members to be able to maybe not even develop new skills, but just to maintain and continue to iterate how they show up in those moments that matter? I'm curious about your vantage point on the development side. So we talked about the talent selection, but on the development side, how are salespeople rehearsing or practicing that execution that matters so much?
It's interesting because, in the sports world, in the competitive world that is kind of outside of what I'd say our commercial businesses, we are given permission to practice. And I think that is where we really hone our talents and our skills with less pressure. So I always came from the world of perfect practice makes perfect. So making sure your practice, your mindset is you are actually in the game, you are in the conversation, you're in that moment, and you are performing as if you were. But you've got this freedom to hone your skills and to fine tune what you're doing. I think in the sales world, especially in the technology world, there's so much expectation and pressure to perform immediately that we're bringing people in, throwing them into, we often say, the deep end of the pool. Still today, we'll say, throw them into the deep end of the pool and hope they swim. And some do, and some don't. And it's a very, very costly mistake, because you're assuming, again, that you're bringing in talent at least at the mid-level. You're not bringing in underperformers, and you want people to have room to grow. So you're assuming they can swim. But anybody gets thrown into the deep end of a pool that doesn't know their environment and what's in that environment is going to struggle, right? There might be 2 or 3% that actually can do that. So as a leader, giving people, the space and the expectation that they need to practice their skills before they're playing in front of that client and having that conversation is really, really critical. And that can happen in a whole bunch of different ways. One is obviously you've got onboarding. I don't think anybody's really got onboarding down perfectly, but not making sure not only that they understand the solution, the product, the capabilities that they're selling to clients, but also that they've got that opportunity to practice. And it can be ride-alongs with other buddies within the system and seeing how things actually work in the field before it's your turn to go and have those conversations and having someone ride along with you. AI role play has come a long way where we can actually practice and interact with what would be a typical client and see if we're doing well or not, and getting that immediate feedback that you would never get from a client around the areas that you really need to practice, but then having the tools to go practice that and try again.
Yes.
Too often we're thrown in again, first week of a new role, and you're talking to a client, you don't get a second at bat if you mess that up. So really giving your people the chance to be successful by doing that onboarding piece really, really well, and making sure that they're performing within your organization well before they're really client facing.
Wow, Stephanie, I really appreciate that. Not just, it can't just stop at that onboarding, and as a sales leader, being able to provide that coaching support for those team members as they continue to grow, whether that's their observational learning from their colleagues, as you mentioned, and kind of that ride along, or even being able to get that feedback when that person observes them performing. I'm astounded by the AI conversational, like the role plays and all that could bring. And to your point that oftentimes people are thrown in, and that space and time is not emphasized enough, right? To be able to get their reps in, and being able to have some of these conversations. So as you know, my book, Moment Ready, excuse me. Let me start that over, production, sorry. So my book, Moment Ready, we talk about the 4 tools to show up in your moments that matter. So being able to be composed, to have clarity, to connect with people and purpose, and also to take that courageous action. And you mentioned the AI role play, right? It's not just understanding your performance domain knowledge. So as you mentioned, what is the solution? What is the capability? What is the value there that you are bringing? And being able to respond to concerns or questions about that, but also like your presence, how you can connect with the person before you, how you can bring clarity in your questioning or response, and how you can also maintain your composure when it feels a bit more stressful, and taking that courageous action. I think that complete development in terms of reps is so critical. And I love seeing where some of those AI solutions are going to be able to have those role plays, but also don't ever forget you've got your buddy next to you. You could also jump on the phone call with and have a 10-minute conversation to rehearse.
For sure. And I think, AI is a tricky area. I think it's being bought a lot more, a lot faster than it was, even last year. I'm going to say ingested. I think we're still struggling with productivity and how to measure productivity using AI. And if it's not only a cost model in terms of like, does it cost us more to have a human over, spending this money on AI, but even like, what is the actual impact on our clients and our customers? And is it a good value realization, or, is it just something we have to do so we don't feel like we're falling behind?
Right.
The upside of using AI in a lot of the prep work is that it can gather information. It's mass intelligence. It can gather information across your organization. Like I'm thinking about, a typical meetings prep sheet, right? So you're preparing for a meeting. If you've got the environment you're working in that actually allows you to practice before you're in front of a client, you've got a meeting prep sheet, for example. And now you can, with AI, go through everything within your organization if it's set up the right way and pull in all the information you need for that client onto a single meeting prep sheet. But without the human insight and oversight, 1, is it accurate and correct?
Yeah.
And 2, what about your own human perspective and experience that actually makes that come to life?
Right.
So if I'm a new rep in an organization, sales rep in an organization, and I'm being handed over a file for a customer, and they've been working with my company for 5 years, they're going to bring in a whole bunch of information that I was never part of, whether it's negotiating contracts, pricing contracts, whether it was challenges with a product or solution or something they really, really liked, whether they were part of a customer advisory board, all these things. It's going to give me that information, but I wasn't there. So now I have to add in my own expertise and my own value from times I have done that with clients. that AI is not going to pick up. So it can get you so far in terms of the time spent to try to gather all that information, but you absolutely still need the human insight and oversight in order to make that a real connection with your client.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a relational exchange, right? Yeah, you might be signing paper or the transaction may be occurring, but at the end of the day, it's a human relational connection there that matters so much. And you're right, that isn't going to be sourced through, all the data set that the AI may be looking at to pull together that prep sheet. Absolutely. I wanted to go back to something you had mentioned about like the metaphor of throwing you into the deep end of the pool. Oftentimes with this fast-paced environment, people are looking for those results like very quickly. Like, what is the signal that this is going to work, right? And that you can deliver or bring the value that the organization is looking for. What have you seen from those high performers who are stepping into that deep into the pool? What is working for them? And also, what is working for those sales leaders of those team members who are able to jump right in? And some of it is like the figure it out or find a way mentality, but also like what are perhaps some specific behaviors that you see either the leaders or the team members exhibiting when they're able to step into that, very quick start and be able to execute?
I think the number one thing I've seen is being a self-starter and being able to work independently without a lot of oversight. Now, that can happen at any point in someone's career. They don't have to be mid-career or more senior in their roles. I've seen early career people exhibit those traits where they take on the responsibility and the accountability very, very quickly, and they make things happen. They don't wait for things to happen for them. So, for example, you've come in a new rep, you've got a new territory, you're given, I don't know, I'm just going to say 50 accounts. It depends on the organization. But let's say you have 50 accounts in your named territory, and you report into a sales leader that probably has 8 to 10 people in span of control, right? Maybe a little bit more now with AI and so forth, but that's span of control. And they very quickly take the responsibility to figure out, okay, where should I be focusing my attention in these accounts? And they start coming out with account strategies. And they'll say, like, what are the things I can do internally while I'm doing my onboarding and learning about this organization, the things that I need to be selling to a client? How can I just calibrate my territory? So where should I be focusing my time and attention? What are where are the most immediate opportunities that I need to be focused on and learn about? And then they go do that. So, for example, they might say, okay, these 5 clients have renewals coming up this quarter. Just an example. I need to go talk to these 5 people internally to understand what's going on with that customer. And, is the renewal at risk? Do we have an opportunity to sell more to that client at renewal time? Are there other people in the organization that we need to get to know? They can do all of that without learning one thing about the product in that organization. So really seeing that like self-starter that takes some of, again, those hardwired skills and transfers those to the new company without worrying about what is it that I'm actually selling. Let me just learn about my clients, right?
Yeah.
That's number one in my territory. Number 2 is get to know the people on your team and quickly figure out who your, I always call it the dirty dozen, who are the 6 people within your organization that are really going to help you be successful. Oftentimes are the same people that were on your interview panel, right? The same people that you were interacting with that had a say on whether or not you should be joining the firm. That's kind of like your inner 6. And then you have an outer 6 of people outside the firm that have either been your mentors over time or connections you've had. They could be former clients, they could be former leaders that you've worked with, and they're helping you think about the organization from the outside in. And that's all work that somebody can do in the first 90 days before they ever talk to a client. And so that self-starter and working autonomously without a lot of supervision is critical.
I love that. So helpful. I'm curious for you. Now, this has been one heck of a journey for you and quite remarkable with all that you've accomplished. I'm curious, when we've talked today about selecting talent, developing talent, but for you as a sales leader, there's also something to be said for the ability to sustain the high performance journey. For you, what has helped you? Is there something in your daily or weekly routine, that immediate actionable strategy that our audience could consider implementing that has worked for you to keep you perhaps grounded or having the energy and motivation to kind of keep going to the next turn?
I think there's two things for me. One is a mental mindset. Mm-hmm. And the mental mindset is really about getting grounded daily in my purpose. Mm-hmm. And what is it that I'm doing every day that brings me purpose, it fulfills my purpose, right? And I love leading sales teams. I love seeing people develop. I love growth. I love that kind of achievement. So that's my purpose. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, really saying, what's the one thing I did achieve today? And it could be something small, like, wow, we got a new piece of collateral out. That feels pretty good. You know, we've really struggled with that for maybe a month, and it might seem small, but finding that one thing. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is a physical mindset, which is like, I love running. I'm a jogger. I'm not by any stretch an athlete in that field anymore. But getting out of bed at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm lacing up my shoes, and I'm like, it's dark, it's cold, it's probably going to rain when I'm out on this run. And I live in the Midwest, near the Great Lakes, and boy, it can be some pretty miserable winters. Wow. Yeah. But just getting the shoes on every day, and then once the shoes are on, get out the door. It's like, okay, it's not as cold as I thought. I could probably do this. And before you know it, you're home, you've ran 3 miles, and it's pretty cool. So, just making sure that I make time for the physical exertion and the restoration after. So those are my two things. It's kind of a physical mindset and a mental mindset around just achievement and finding purpose.
I love it. Very, very helpful reminders for all of us just to get up and move, whatever that looks like for you. But just being able to have that break, right? Like to be able, oftentimes many of the executives that I work with, whether they walk or they jog or they bike or, even taking their dog out, they talk about how that time away is just such an energy boost, but also mentally clarifying. They are able to kind of perhaps find a solution that they may not had if they just kind of had their head down at their keyboard for another hour. And really appreciate the connection to purpose. Stephanie, this has been a pleasure. I'm very grateful for you and this conversation, and look forward to many more. So thank you for being on Still Evolving.
Thank you, Dr. Amy. Appreciate it.